Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaivam Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Madhiraye. This morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 15. Alright, so please repeat. Stiram Sukham Chasanam Astito Yatir Yada Jihasur Imam Angalokam Kale Chadeshe Chamano Nasajjaye Prananyachen Manasajitasu. Please repeat. Stiram, without being disturbed. Sukham, comfortable. Cha, also. Asanam, sitting accommodation. Astita, being situated. Yati, the sage. Yada, whenever. Jihasu, desires to give up. Imam, this. Anga, O king. Lokam, this body. Kale, in time. Cha, and. Dese, in a proper place. Cha, also. Mana, the mind. Na, not. Sajjaye, may not be perplexed. Pranan, the senses. Niyache, must control. Manasa, by the mind. Jita asu, conquering the life air. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O king, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place. He should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Please repeat. O king, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should sit comfortably without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Purport. In the Bhagavad-Gita 8:14, it is clearly stated that a person who is totally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and who constantly remembers Him at every step, easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into His personal contact. Such devotees do not need to seek an opportune moment to leave the present body. But those who are mixed devotees, alloyed with fruitive action or empirical philosophical speculation, require an opportune moment for quitting this body. For them, the opportune moments are stated in the Bhagavad-Gita 8:23 through 26. But these opportune moments are not as important as one's being a successful yogi. But these opportune moments are not as important as one's being a successful yogi who is able to quit his body as he likes. Such a yogi must be competent to control his senses by the mind. The mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatadine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. I want to ask for the blessings of the senior devotees and Vaishnavas so I can speak something. It's going to be of some service to the Srimad Bhagavatam and to the community of devotees. So, we're hearing, this is the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, second chapter, and we're continuing to hear this introduction by Shukadev Goswami. He's replying to the question directly asked by the king, Maharaj Parikshit, about what to do, what is the best thing to do for one who is about to die, one who is about to leave this world, leave his body. And so he's beginning this explanation in a very broad context. He begins it as his instruction for everyone, and then he gets very specific very quickly. So this is part of that broad explanation. He's casting a wide net, as we can say, and he's beginning to speak about the process of yoga. The process of yoga is the process of mechanically controlling the senses. So in this verse, it's saying that one should sit comfortably without being disturbed, and should regulate the life air, and should control the senses by the mind. And this is what he's saying. When a yogi wants to leave the planet, this is what he should do. So this is also explained in the Bhagavad-Gita, as Prabhupada points out in the purport of the 8th chapter. And also this process of yoga, of controlling the senses and sitting in a place, a quiet place, and controlling the mind and stopping the activities so we can focus on the self in a mechanical way. This is ultimately what the process of yoga is: stopping all external engagement, getting into those higher levels of meditation, and ultimately the highest platform of yoga is called samadhi, which means you stop all activities and you're engaged in this meditative state, this trance-like state of self-realization. So this is one process of yoga that's recommended in the Vedas, and this is it's described as the ascending process, where we're depending on our own powers of control. We try to control our mind and senses by our own mental capabilities. But then in this chapter, it goes on to explain, and also in the Bhagavad-Gita, so Krishna explains this to Arjuna, this process, this mechanical process, and Arjuna actually rejects it, that it's not possible for him. And so also in this same way, Maharaj Parikshit also, or Sukadeva Goswami also goes on to say that actually there's a better process than this. There's a better process. In the end of this chapter, he goes on to say it is better just to engage in the process of bhakti, to hear about Krishna and to glorify Krishna. If you can do that directly, it's much faster and more effective. But he's giving this broad net in the beginning of his instructions. So I wanted to read one of the purports that Srila Prabhupada gave in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, when Arjuna rejected this process as not being applicable, because it's a very important point to understand. So I'll read the verse and purport. So this is the Bhagavad-Gita 6:33. Translation: Arjuna said, "O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady." And Srila Prabhupada's purport here. The system of mysticism described by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, beginning with the words Sucho Deshe and ending with Yogi Parama, is here being rejected by Arjuna out of a feeling of inability. It is not possible for an ordinary man to leave home and go to a secluded place in the mountains or jungles to practice yoga in this age of Kali. The present age is characterized by a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. The present age is characterized by a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. People are not serious about self-realization, even by simple practical means, and what to speak of this difficult yoga system, which regulates the mode of living, the manner of sitting, selection of place, and detachment from the mind, from material engagements. As a practical man, Arjuna thought it was impossible to follow this system of yoga. Even though he was favorably endowed in many ways, he belonged to the royal family and was highly elevated in terms of numerous qualities. He was a great warrior and he had great longevity, and above all, he was the most intimate friend of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 5,000 years ago, Arjuna had much better facilities than we do now. Yet he refused to accept this system of yoga. In fact, we do not find any record in history of his practicing it at any time. Therefore, this system must be considered generally impossible in this age of Kali. Of course, it may be possible for some very few rare men, but for the people in general, it is an impossible proposal. If this were so 5,000 years ago, then what of the present day? Those who are imitating this yoga system in different so-called schools and societies, although complacent, are certainly wasting their time. They are completely in ignorance of the desired goal. So, Srila Prabhupada explains very nicely in that purport that this age of Kali, it's not actually possible to achieve the perfection of the mechanical yoga system in this age. So he repeated it again and again, actually. So I'm just going to explain that. It's not that yoga, practicing yoga, asanas and pranayama is a bad thing, but the fact is that it's actually not possible to achieve the end result of self-realization in this age through that process. It's not practical because we're not qualified actually to practice it. And it goes on to explain what this yoga process, as the authentic yoga process described in the Vedas, actually is in this chapter, controlling the senses and ultimately achieving the stage of liberation from all material desires and material existence. So it goes on to explain that if you can achieve perfection in this human life through this yoga system, you can go straight back to the spiritual world. But if you have some desires for still some material enjoyment, then you will go to this, you go up to Maharloka. So if you practice yoga very seriously, but you still have some traces of material desires, you have to work it out still. But if you're very serious about it, you'll go up to the higher planetary systems, and you'll continue to engage in the practice. And then from there, you go higher and higher up to the point of the highest planet in the universe, and from there you attain perfection. So this can take millions and millions of years actually to attain this perfection of the yoga system. In this human platform, you can engage very seriously, and then you can get to these higher planetary systems. But Srila Prabhupada explains that this process was better suited for other ages, and that there's a better opportunity to engage in spiritual life during this time. And that's the chanting of the holy name, is that the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, the process of kirtan. It's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam that this process is the most suitable process of self-realization for this current age, and it's more like a descending process, accepting the mercy of Krishna. So while, like we just had kirtan just now, and we do it every day at this time, but that experience of chanting with the mridanga and glorifying Krishna as a group, this is the special benediction for this age. We can experience actually that this process of kirtan is suitable for us. If we take it very seriously, we can make a lot of spiritual advancement in this time. So that's the basis of this verse, and I'm just breaking down the system of yoga and where this chapter is heading to, and where the rest of the Bhagavatam is heading to. So in the rest of the Bhagavatam, it doesn't go on to explain this process of yoga, giving instructions how to sit in a secluded place, how to go to the forest and meditate. These are two introductory chapters where Shukadeva Goswami casts a broad net as to this is possible. You could possibly meditate on the universal form. You could possibly engage in this yoga practice. These are paths to lead to the Supreme. These are possible things you could do to prepare for death. But he goes on to say that this is not actually the best thing. The best thing is simply to hear about and glorify the Supreme Lord directly. This is the fastest way to achieve perfection. Rather than mechanically controlling the mind and senses, going up to the higher planetary systems and engaging further in this process of yoga, and then getting to the planet of Brahma, and then merging into the Supreme through that. This is the mechanical process of attaining the perfection of yoga. But simply by chanting Hare Krishna, we can go very rapidly beyond all these processes. So this is the glory of chanting Hare Krishna. It goes deeper and deeper the more you go into it. That's why we can keep chanting every day, because we actually don't know the power and the potency of chanting this simple mantra. It's just 3 words, but we've been chanting every day for so long. Just a practical example, if you repeat the same words over and over again of any random word, it just gets very sickening, very old. Any popular song, famous songs, if you keep singing that song every day, especially as a religious ritual, any Beatles song or any popular song, they after hearing it on the radio a few times a day for a couple months, you just get sick of it. You just want a new song to listen to meditate upon. But the Hare Krishna mantra just keeps going, because especially when you're hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam alongside it, you understand how to go deeper into the chanting. So you can keep chanting and keep going deeper and keep going deeper, and it doesn't get old. You just keep repeating the same mantra, but all of a sudden it's a different experience, because you're going deeper into your understanding. and it's a reservoir of pleasure and spiritual insight that comes from this chanting alongside the hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So what is the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam? After this, after this chapter, it really enters into the message of the next chapter is specifically about pure devotional service, and then we get into the creation of the universe, and then we go on to hear continuously about the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Like I said, Shukadeva Goswami doesn't from this point say, let's now focus on the yoga process, controlling the senses. He goes on to say, no, the best process is to hear about Krishna and to glorify Krishna. So then he goes on to do that for the rest of the Bhagavatam. So then, just backing up, we can break down the philosophy of the Bhagavatam that's established. It's big, but I can from the first verse we understand what is the message of the Bhagavatam, that there's a supreme person who's the source of our existence, and so and that source is a person. That's why we chant the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Vasudeva is a name for Krishna, and Bhagavate is a title, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Srila Prabhupada explains. So this is the message of the Bhagavatam, is that so that we're part of, we can observe this universe, and this universe is coming from a Supreme Person, and this Supreme Person has these potencies. So he expands himself into these universes to create the universe. And then he also exists separate from the universe. So he's existing in his own abode. He has a separate existence from these creation of the universes. So it's explained there that there's the Supreme Lord in his own abode, and then there's the material creation, this material energy, which is a potency of this Supreme Person, and then there's what's called the marginal energy, which is us. We're the living entities who have the choice to be within the material energy or within the spiritual energy. So this is like called the tattva. There's the Vishnu tattva, there's the Shakti tattva, and then there's the Jiva tattva. So understanding these categories, there's the Supreme Person, and there's the material energy, and then there's us who are in between. And we have the choice to go from material and spiritual. And the process of going from material to spiritual is called yoga. And then there's the mechanical yoga of controlling the mind and senses, raising up to higher levels. And then there's the bhakti, which is directly approaching the Supreme Lord through devotion, through the act and processes of devotional service, chanting and hearing about Krishna and serving Krishna. And this is what the Bhagavatam explains as it's actually a more direct and more effective process than the process of yoga, the Ashtanga yoga process. So this theology is also, it's not only within the realm of the Vedic text too. I was studying this book about Christian history also, and it was explaining there's this theology, or theologian who wrote this epic I think it's in the 16th century. It's a 3-part series called Dante's Divine Comedy, and he explains that there's 3 parts. So it goes into Dante's Inferno, Dante's Purgatorio, and Dante's Paradiso. So he explains that there's these also within the Bhagavatam, there's this samsara that there's the heaven and the hell, and then there's the heavenly regions, and then human regions, the earthly planets, and then also just above the earthly planets, there's the purgatorio, or the ghostly realm, and this is also explained specifically in the Srimad Bhagavatam also. So it's interesting how even in other theologies, they've also connected and understood this realm of samsara, and then he also goes on to explain that all these things that come from a supreme person also, and the goal is to get out of this cycle of going up and down through this cycle of heaven and hell, up and down, and then the human realm is in the middle. So the getting out of this process is what the process of yoga is, and the Srimad Bhagavatam is very clear about this process also. So that's pretty much what I prepared for. It's a lot of information to explain. I'm wondering if anybody has any comments or questions on this, what I've shared so far.
Can I say something about sound vibrations? Because you were saying that like three things that would also like how do you say confirm. I don't know how to say that. Anyway, so my brother Krishnadas one time showed me his science about water crystals with a Japanese scientist, don't remember his name, but it was an experiment with water crystals, and it showed that just by thinking certain things or saying certain things, his crystals would like turn really beautiful or really like destroyed. And thinking that our body is made of like 75% water, and what an effect sound and thoughts and that kind of energy has on us, you can actually see how important thoughts and sound vibrations are. So I think also in this way, you can also see how important the Maha Mantra is, because it's also sound and has a direct effect, even in science, on your, whole consciousness and body.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for the class. You mentioned about how we should approach bhakti, the process of approaching God directly. And then we also hear from Bhagavad-Gita that just try to approach the spiritual master in submissively. So how can we explain to someone who's new to Krishna consciousness that yes, the path is directly going to God, but then we go through his representatives?
How do we explain that to somebody who's beginning the process? Well, that's what Krishna says to do. Krishna says that how to approach him. He explains in the Bhagavad-Gita to do that. So he explains it directly there, and he explains it in many places in the Bhagavatam to approach him through his devotees. So yeah, there's scriptural evidence that that's the proper way. So yeah, it's different points of like explaining the yoga systems and explaining that bhakti is directly approaching the Supreme Lord, as opposed to going a more roundabout way through. And the reason why there's the roundabout way also is because some people aren't ready to go the direct route also. That's what was explained in the last verse. in the last verse, text 14, it says, "Unless the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and the material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties." So it's saying that if you can just develop the sense of loving service to the Supreme Lord, then you can just do that. But if you can't do that, there's other options. So there's different qualifications in the process of yoga. And these other paths are there to help you make advancement from where you're at. So it's not that the indirect paths are useless, but if there is a direct path and you hear about it and you're able to follow it, you find people who are doing it, then you can follow that. So that's what it means by directly approaching. And then that within that process, there's the instruction to take shelter of a guru and learn from him how to engage in this direct process. So, yeah.
Can you give some analogies, like the one where we don't approach the president directly, we approach his representatives, and the person who approaches the dog of the master?
Yeah, you just shared them. You can share. You want to explain them?
Just when we approach the path of bhakti, then we say, some people might say, we want to go to God directly because that's the path. But let's say there's the president in the country and he has his representatives. If we just an ordinary person, like we won't even be able to go beyond like for example the White House to approach the president. So we have to go through his representative, qualify ourselves, show our credentials, and then that person will approach the president and say, like, oh, this person has this qualification, they can do this service for the country. So that's why we also approach Srila Prabhupada, we need to Guru Puja, because he's the direct representative of God and he's approaching his spiritual master. So there's a chain. We don't go directly to God thinking that we are qualified. We always have this quality of humility where we approach the dear representatives of God, and then he takes notice of us that, oh, they're taking interest in my dear son, then we take interest in that person. And the other example I was thinking of was when a man is walking his dog and someone says, oh, what a cute dog, then the master is going to take interest in that person, that they're taking interest in my dog. But if we just try to flatter the master, then he'll just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Is there any other questions or thoughts?
Thank you for a nice class. You mentioned that in this age we're not qualified for the more mechanical type of yoga. So I just wondered in what ways are we not qualified to do that?
Well, it's explained that in the purport that I read that we don't have we don't have enough time. So we're living in a short, our lives are shorter. There's other periods, universal periods, where the earthly planet, the human beings live for longer periods of time. So you can engage in this process of yoga, of sitting and controlling the mind and senses for longer periods of time. And the bodies are stronger. It's explained, and there's a direct verse in the Bhagavatam that explains the situation of Kali Yuga. But we have, here it says that the present age is characterized by a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. So the main thing is that we don't have enough time to practice, to make advancement in this process of yoga. and then we don't have the attention span. Like in this verse that I read here, which is beginning to explain it, it's saying that you should go to a proper place and you should sit comfortably without being disturbed. So how long can we sit, just that first instruction, just sit comfortably without being disturbed? How long can we do it? Like, can we do it for an hour? Can we do it for a week, for a month, for a year? Like, there's explanations that yogis engage in this meditation for years or even thousands of years in previous ages. That this is like almost all they do with their time. Like they start to eat a lot less, and then they start to practice the pranayama, so then they even stop eating and they just engage in meditation, and they're getting their energy source through different ways. And we hardly can do that. To stop eating. Some people try to do it. I've seen people who have yogic tendencies, they try to stop eating and get into this process. But oftentimes they just end up like withering away and like having to go to like a hospital and like get like IVs for their like nutrients and things like that. I've seen a couple people like that. So if you imitate it, like Prabhupada was very heavy about this, trying to imitate the process of yoga in this age, and he repeated it again and again that it's just not possible, and that there's nothing wrong, like I said, with like doing it as like doing some exercise and stretching, but Prabhupada was very clear to call it what it is. It's not a process that's going to lead to ultimate self-realization in this age. It's good for your health, the whole yoga scene and things like that, but it's important to realize that in and of itself, it's just not possible to achieve like these higher states of perfection through this yoga in these current times. And that's why Prabhupada repeated that it is a bit of a cheating system when you try to explain that if people are presenting that this is possible to attain like the perfection of spiritual life through this process at this time, it's a bit like cheating. If the teachers are explaining this is just good for your health and it will help you, it's just like exercise, then that's fine. But if this is like you're going to attain the perfection of yoga, then Prabhupada was very heavy about that this isn't possible. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you for your attention. And Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.